Can Tu Diep become a doctor? After all the events that happened since James' company went into trouble, to the kidnappings, was followed and witnessed James feigning illness to overthrow Joe. Tu Diep gradually realized one thing: this life is too fragile, and what she is doing is selling gourds and picking bananas, or stands still watching the game sick. Still not enough to help others overcome real suffering. When James was hospitalized for abuse, both physically and mentally, Tu Diep almost collapsed. But then when she cooked porridge to wipe his face, when the doctor came to report that James was showing signs of exhaustion, a strange light lit up in her heart. She felt like she didn't want to just sit and watch the person she loved, pain, but want to really be able to touch life, heal it with your own hands. Since then she started studying nursing, part-time in a district hospital. At first, it was just administrative work supporting blood pressure measurement. But the more she interacted with the sick, the more fascinated she became. An old doctor in the hospital once looked at her affectionately and say, "You have eyes like a real doctor. OT only see the disease, but also see the pie." Not long after, thanks to James's silent support, she studied community medicine, aiming to become a frontline doctor in the countryside, where children are stunted by lack of medicine, where old people still think illness is fate. What is the philosophy of life and saving the sick that Tu Diep learned? After an emergency, when an old lady was successfully resuscitated by her during a stroke, Tu Diep stood alone outside the hospital porch. Looking at the distant gourd field, I silently shed tears. She thought, in a world full of strife and hurt, save a life, even if it's just to keep them one more day with their loved ones. Also a way to keep warm for humanity. The philosophy of life of the Cochlea is thus encapsulated in three things. To save someone is to keep hope for someone. Sometimes you don't have to do big things. Just stand by someone when they are most scared. Has also been a form of medicine. A doctor does more than heal the body, but also heals faith. First time in operating room. Tu Diep trembled but did not retreat. The monitor beeps regularly. In the white space of the operating room, Esther standing next to the doctor, maimed to gloves, sweaty palms, even though the room was cold because of the air conditioning. The patient is a 6-year-old child who had a traffic accident, undergoing emergency surgery. Blood spilled on the bandage. Tu Diep is not the main surgeon, but she is in charge of blood pressure monitoring, put tools, and observe every move of the head doctor. Every second that passes, she felt her heart beat. No longer follow the rules, but blend into each business transactio. Every tense look of the nurse. She remembered what her father had said. You were born in the village, don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. Best banana picking girl. The village is also the daughter of the 3 most proud. But now she doesn't just pick bananas anymore. She is touching the boundary between life and death. When the surgery was successful, the child breathed again. The attending physician looked at her and nodded slightly. I don't have to be the best, but today I did the right thing. Tu Diep smiled under the mask. Her eyes were wistful. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small anymore. Tu Diep returned to his hometown to open a small clinic by the bamboo grove. A few months later, with the support of James and the suicide community, Diep decided to open a free clinic in his hometown, where she used to pick gourds, wearing conical hats and going to the market in the rye. Small room with only one hospital bed, a medicine cabinet and some first aid kits. But it was built with all the heart. Every morning the elderly come to measure their blood pressure. Children come to ask for cold medicine. Pregnant rural women come to listen to fetal heartbeat. They called her back the obstetricia because she still wears a white shirt but wears flip-flops, and sometimes still pick gourds to cook soup. One afternoon, an old lady held her trembling hand and said, "Since my husband died, I have not felt anyone touch my shoulder." Gentle like her, Tu Diep held back her tears. She knew she had chosen the right path. Tu Diep told James when he visited the clinic, "I used to think I was just a country girl, but now I know. No matter where you are, just live kindly and do small things," is also a form of medicine. Medicine to heal the heart. James hugged her. In the windy afternoon light, Tu Diep's blue and white shirt fluttered like a bird's wings. "Just found my own sky." Mysterious patient and the heart-touching truth. A rainy day while Tu Diep cleaning the clinic. Then a strange man walked by. His face was full of scars and his gait was static. Cold eyes but seemed to know her from a previous life. He sat down in the chair. "Give a piece of paper. Medical examination results from a major hospital in the city. End-stage liver cancer. I don't have long to live. But before I die, I want you to keep a secret from me. If she says her lover will be gone." Tu Diep raised his head. Her heart suddenly turned cold. "Buy that paper." In the hospital sponsor section is the familiar name John. The mysterious patient was John's closest aide, was the one who caused the accident that killed her father many years ago, and is also the person who currently holds the evidence on the withdrawal. Investment bankrupted James's company. The choice between conscience and the one she loves. Man puts a usp on the table. Here is an audio recording of John ordering a withdrawal. Sabotage of James's hydroelectric project. "But if she gives raw, I will die before I die for betraying." Purple leaf holding USB in hand, eyes tormented. "If she keeps." And let this man live out his last days in peace. James will never have the evidence to overthrow John. If she hands over the recording, James can save the company, overturn justice. But she will be the one to send a sick person to death. That night Purple Leaf cannot sleep. She wrote in her diary, "Medical ethics teaches me to protect the sick. Love teaches me to protect the one I love. But if you choose the right medicine, am I wrong with my heart?" The fateful morning Tu Diep found James. The next day, Tu Diep brought the USB to meet James at a hill. Where do people used to eat rice rolls together in the rye? She put the USB in his hand and said, "This is the evidence that helps you turn the truth around. But I ask you one thing. Don't let that man die in fear. Do what you have to do. But don't be a person without compassion." James looked at her in amazement. In his eyes was faith, sincerity, and silent sacrifice. He squeezed her hand. "Tu Diep, you don't have to choose between loving me or becoming a doctor. because the way you live makes me love you more. Possible sequel. James used the right evidence to expose the innocent, but still ensure safety for Kier patients. Tu Diep was awarded the E-Woman Award, inspired by a humanitarian medical organization. John knew he was in more danger than ever. The lives of Tu Diep and James enter a new phase. The storm is still there, but they are not alone anymore. Final confrontation: enemy or lost one. James, holding USB, walked straight into his company's shareholder meeting at that time. John is manipulating the situation. Continue to pressure shareholders. Withdraw from James' remaining projects. Everyone was arguing when James appeared. Calm voice. Before you decide to withdraw your capital, I want everyone to listen to a recording. In the classroom, absolute silence. John's cold voice came through the speaker. Just drain all the hydropower capital to let the game sink. As long as it backs that project, as long as farmers have water, we have not won. East Asian shareholders are horrified, and one person speaks up. This is John's voice. Are you destroying the company for personal gain? John stood up with his face pale, but he still tried to struggle. You think you can turn me over with just a recording? James is calm. I don't need to turn you over, John. The truth will do it. John, the enemy or victim of the past. After the meeting, James and John met privately. John looked at James, eyes no longer fierce, but just a man tired of hatred. I used to believe that your father took my family's land. I used to think revenge is the only way to make someone like you suffer, like I used to hurt. James said in a low voice, but now you know, right? My father has corrected that land he returned long ago. The only person holding grudges is you. John was silent and then pulled out a necklace. This is my mother's. She said, don't let hatred kill your gentle son. But I don't list. James looked at John with eyes that were not hostile, but the eyes of a man who knows pie. Know how to forgive. You can still make things right, but not by revenge. Live and make amends. John collapsed. Late tears fall not because of defeat, but because of him. Finally freed from his own darkness. 1 year later, Dr. Tu Diep and his future mother lie. 1 year later, in the peaceful countryside, where purple eggplant flowers bloom all over the land, Tu Diep is giving free medical examinations to people. She wears a blue and white shirt. Inside there is a small ultrasound image stored in the shirt pocket. James came from afar, holding a bouquet of gourds and a sparkling wedding ring. He knelt down in the middle of the field. Tu Diep, I have nothing left but this heart. But if you still choose me. He vowed to spend his whole life protecting his small family. Tu Diep was so moved that she was speechless. She grabbed James's hand and nodded. I don't need anything more than you and our child. In the distance, Dung is helping to replant the forest that was destroyed in the past. Live a simple life to make up for mistakes. The philosophy of life that Tu Diep learned. Finally, Tu Diep wrote in his medical notebook, being a doctor is not just about healing the body, but to heal the wounds of the soul. When love is not just holding but also learning to let go of hatred, to move towards the future together.